Good afternoon, everybody. This is Paul Reyes with Common Look. Thanks for joining us in today's webinar on links, authoring and tagging them in PDFs. Before we begin, just take care of a little housekeeping, making sure that you can hear me okay, but you're on mute. So if you're having issues with the webinar platform itself, if you need that kind of technical help, please drop a note into the chat and Susan is there to help you out. Meanwhile, if you have a question about the content in today's webinar, please drop those questions in the Q&A pod, and we will check that at the end and answer as many questions as we have time for. Also, just a quick note, the webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to you to the captioned recording when it's available. So please give us a few days or so to get the captioning taken care of, but be on the lookout for it, and we will get that sent to you as quickly as possible. So really quickly go over today's agenda, talking about links. We'll talk about some authoring considerations, things to keep in mind. Oftentimes when I talk to people in the industry, I hear a lot of interesting myths about links from an authoring standpoint as well as from a tagging standpoint. So we'll talk about some of those as well. And then we'll get into actually tagging links, right? Talk about, what do you need to do? And we'll actually show some various scenarios and verification and stuff as well. And then certainly, as I mentioned, we will check out the Q&A pod for questions and address as many of those as we have time for. Also, at the end, we'll pop up our contact information so that if you think of a question after the fact or we don't have time to get to your question today, there'll be contact information for how you can follow up with us. So with that, let's get right into things. Myths and misunderstandings when it comes to authoring links. I have heard various accessibility people, reviewers and testers and so on, complain about links in some documents. And some of the complaints that I've heard, some of the things that I've been told, is that people are under the impression that the only text that is allowed to be underlined in a document is hyperlinked text. Another thing that I've heard is that links need to be in blue, right, as opposed to the black text on the document, for example. Links need to be in blue, or similarly, I've also heard that in documents, the only text that's allowed to be blue is hyperlinked text. None of these are true. None of these, the standards, don't say anything about, what you are or are not allowed to underline, or what can or can't be blue or anything like that. So now the standards do say, there's got to be multiple ways of knowing, for example, that something is a link, but they don't get so specific as to say, the only thing that can be underlined is a link, or blue, or any other color for that matter. Although, of course, as we've talked in other webinars, we don't want to use color as the only way of conveying information. You want to keep in mind contrast and things like that as well. But these things that are on the screen now that I've just mentioned, those are myths, and none of those are actually true. When it comes to creating links in documents, visually, you want to think about some things, right? Somebody who's reading your document should be able to read just the hyperlinked text and know where that link is going to take them or what it's going to do, right? If it's a link for an email, for example. So when you are creating hyperlinks in your documents, if you're just hyperlinking the words click here or more or link, then you're not really meeting that requirement, right? And one of the reasons, of course, is that screen reader users can pull up a list of links in the document and just read through that list. And so if all they hear is click here, more, link, they don't know which link is gonna take them to or do what they want it to do until they follow it. And then you know, then you come to find out that, oops, that was the wrong link. I didn't want to follow that one. Then you have to find your way back and stuff like that. So use good hyperlinked text so that somebody can read just the link and know where that's going to take you, right? Equally bad would be a really long cryptic looking URL with, you know, percent signs and abbreviations of words that somebody has to figure out. Equally unhelpful, right? Also, from a kind of a best practice standpoint, try to keep your hyperlinked text to one line, right? If you've got a really long thing that you're linking, maybe figure out another way to word it so that it can be shorter and limited to one line in your document, for example. Also, like I mentioned before, while there's no requirement about underlining or blue or anything like that, you do, of course, need to keep in mind contrast requirements and stuff like that, right? If your hyperlinked text is blue, make sure that your blue has sufficient contrast that people can actually read it, right? So just some things to keep in mind from a visual formatting perspective. Then once the PDF is generated, right, and then you have to make sure that the links are tagged correctly and accessible. There's additional things to keep in mind, right? So first of all, a properly tagged link, you'll have a link tag that contains, generally speaking, contains two things. It'll be the hyperlinked text and the object reference or the annotation, right? If you open up the tag tree in Acrobat, for example, you'll see an OBJR, that's the object reference. In Common Look, it shows as the annotation. Either way, it's the same thing, and that's the actual clickable part of the link, right? The functional part that takes you to a website, for example. So link tags need to contain the hyperlinked text and the annotation. Link tags need to be placed in some other kind of structural tag. Now I put that in air quotes because that's not the technical term, but to not get too far into the technical weeds here, the way link tags work by the rules of the standards and so on, they need to go inside something else, like a paragraph, right? Or if you have a list with links in it, then your link tags would be inside the L body, for example. But they can't go out at the root level, right? When you, now, as I mentioned on the last slide, try to keep your links to one line, but sometimes that doesn't happen, right? Sometimes links go on to 2 lines. So if you have a link that does take up 2 lines in your document, both of the annotations, there will likely be 2 annotations, one for each line. So both of those annotations need to go inside the link tag. And the text and the annotations, of course, need to be in the correct reading order as well. It doesn't matter inside the link tag, by the way, if you have your text and then the annotation, or the annotation and then the text, right? That order doesn't matter within the link tag, but kind of a best practice to not zipper text and annotations. And what I mean by that is if you were to look inside a link tag, if you had text for the first line of the link and then that annotation and then the second line of text and then the second line's annotation, then that's what I'm referring to when I say zippering. So you want to keep all of the text together and then all of the annotations together, or vice versa, have all of the annotations together and then all of the text inside your link tag, right? Now, another interesting topic for conversation that often comes up. In fact, I was just having some conversations last week and earlier this week about alternative text for link tags and the contents attribute for the annotation, right? So depending on what standard you're following, for example, PDF UA requires that the annotation have the contents attribute assigned to it. WCAG 2.0 and 2.1 requires link tags have alternative text, right? Now, and we'll show in Common Look some, when the link tag doesn't have the alternative text or the contents for the annotation, you get failures or warnings and so on, and we'll talk about those in just a second. But long story short, kind of at least one of those things has to be true for WCAG. PDF UA, again, as I mentioned, is a little bit more specific that the contents has to be assigned to the link annotation. Now, that being said, and this is some of the source of confusion and the, head scratching a little bit and so on, because while PDF UA requires that the annotation has contents, most, if not all, assistive technology doesn't actually read the contents to somebody. So it ends up not being exposed. So I can't really get into the whole why does PDF UA require it if AT doesn't expose it. But really, that comes down to the implementation of assistive technology, right? AT, by the way, meaning assistive technology like screen readers, refreshable braille displays, and so on. So the standard says the contents, has to be assigned to the annotation. So really, assistive technology should expose the annotation's contents. The alternative text on link tags does get read by most, not all, assistive technologies, right? Now, another interesting branch off of this conversation that came up last week is if you provide alternative text for a link tag, then that's what gets read and not the text that's inside the link tag itself, right? And sometimes this could be good or sometimes not, depending on your various needs for your organization and so on. So just something to think about, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more about this as we get into actually tagging a PDF and the links that are in it, right? So away we go. Go ahead and navigate to a PDF. And there's a very simple document, right? We're just focusing on links today. So it's really basically just text and links, but we'll go ahead and open Common Look and dive into some of this stuff. You can see it in action. I see the questions and things popping into the chat Q&A pod, by the way. Thanks for dropping your questions in there, and we'll check those out shortly. All right, so as we navigate through our tags first, we've got an H1 for the title of my document. That's fine. And then paragraph tags going down the rest of the tag tree for the content in our document. So the first paragraph, there's a link. So sometimes speaking, when we're talking about in context and can you read the hyperlink text, as it says in the first paragraph, sometimes you can get away with providing just the URL if it's short and clear and easy to understand where that's going to take somebody, like this URL here, just commonlook.com. Pretty clear it's going to take me to the Common Look website, whereas the last link on the page looks a little bit more interesting as far as, I have no idea where that would take me. But anyway, so into our first paragraph tag, I see that there's the text for that paragraph and then the annotation. Again, that's the clickable part. So I need to put the text and the annotation together inside a link tag. So to do that, one way to do this is just highlight the text in the physical view, make sure that I get the text and the annotation selected, and then just put it inside a link tag. I'm going to close up some stuff in my tag tree, make things a little bit less confusing looking maybe. So we've got the text and then we have our link tag with the text inside and the annotation as well. So that first link is taken care of for now. As I mentioned, with alternative text and stuff like that, of course, I can kind of cheat and use the functionality of Common Look to take care of that alternative text automatically for me. So I'm going to take the easy way and do it that way. So the next paragraph has another annotation in it for training calendar, right? And clearly that's a well-formatted link. I can read training calendar and know where that's going to take me. So I've got the text selected and the annotation. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut here, put that in a link tag, and then close up some stuff in my tag tree. So there's my link tag with the annotation inside it. I got a space before the word training calendar. Not a big deal there. Close up that text element so that we can see the link tag with the annotation and the text, right? So again, leaving my link tags inside the paragraph tags so that the nesting is taken care of correctly as well. The next one, we've got a paragraph of text, and then the last line, again, is the annotation. This one's a little bit longer. Maybe we will use some alternative text a little bit differently for this one. So again, go ahead and tag up my link first. Go from there. So we have, again, our link tag with the text and the annotation. And then the very last paragraph tag is just hyperlink text. There's two annotations here, one for the top line, one for the second line. So I'm just going to select all of that stuff and put that in a link tag as well. All right, so there we go. There's my links, a couple different scenarios there. Wanted to make sure we had a link that was on two lines, so we have two annotations. And again, we have the text for the whole hyperlink and then the two annotations, top line, bottom line, right, in the correct order and all of that. So I'm going to go back up to the top of my tag tree and create my document tag just to wrap things all up nicely. And then we'll run our verification and take care of the other things that maybe we need to address with tagging links. So I'm going to run two checks like I always do, the structural test and test for accessibility. ISO 32000 is literally the standard on how to make a PDF. When you test against ISO 32000 using CommonLook, by the way, and your document has links in it, CommonLook will actually test those links to make sure that they're not broken. That's a nice little free service that we do. Somebody last week, in last week's webinar, they asked, hey, how come you're not testing against PDF UA? So this week, this is for you, but I'm also going to choose WCAG 2.1 for the people who are maybe curious about that as well, right? So what we will see, though, is, for example, if something that fails PDF UA, if it also fails WCAG, it might be listed twice in my results because it failed against both standards. But the nice thing is when I fix it in one, it's going to be fixed in the other. So my failures will go away a whole lot faster. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and run my full validation and see how things go. So that little pause right there while it was opening up, by the way, it was CommonLook testing the links to make sure that they weren't broken and stuff like that. As we've done in other webinars where we've run verification, I'm going to filter out the things that have passed and don't apply to this document and see, first of all, what things did we fail? Wow, that looks like a big, scary list. And then we'll also check out what do we need to manually verify and what warnings do we have, right? Now, this first one here, this first failure doesn't actually have anything to do with links. This is for setting the PDF UA flag in the document. So I'll go ahead and use my fix wizard there, excuse me, to solve that problem. So now we come to the first failure with links, right? And when I select it, it takes me to the first link in the document, right? And my failure here is for the parent tag of the link annotation, that would be the link tag, doesn't define the alt attribute, doesn't have alternative text. The next failure down is for the same link, right? And this is telling me that the link annotation doesn't define the contents attribute, right? So because neither of those things are going on in that first link, I've got two failures. But I can quickly and easily fix this, and CommonLook makes things even easier for me to address this. I'm going to start with the alternative text for the link tag, and then we'll deal with the contents on the annotation. So we can use, so CommonLook is going to automatically take the hyperlinked text and use that as the alternative text, which in this case, maybe I want to provide the URL, and it's pretty simple, just the HTTPS and then commonlook.com, right? Somebody can read that and know where it's going to take them. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that and hit finish. Right now, you'll notice in my results panel, the other failure for the link annotation not having the contents attribute, that went away. It'll come back. It becomes a warning as opposed to a failure, right? But we're going to address all of our warnings as well. So continuing on, I can just double click to bring up my fix wizard, right? Or I could right click on a failure and choose fix. Either way, same place. I get brought to the same place, which is my fix wizard. Again, CommonLook using the hyperlinked text training calendar. And I can go ahead and go with that. So I'll use it. So I can kind of go through the links quickly. Now the next one is for a URL, right? The alternative text is the URL itself. Maybe I want to change that. So in fact, I'll just put in here that this is the CommonLook training calendar. right? There you go. Now, I know I don't need to, by the way, don't need to say link to, for example, because when a screen reader lands on the link tag, it's going to say link. So for me to say link to the Common Look training calendar, that would be redundant, right? So I'll just go ahead and use Common Look training calendar and hit finish. There we go. And then another example, this is that really long, weird looking URL that I have no idea where it's going to take me if I'm looking at it, but it starts with Amazon.com. This is a pair of shoes that I bought recently. So shoes I bought, right? Just in case you're interested. So there we go. I'll go ahead and hit finish and take care of that, right? So now we're down to the user verification items. Some things are going to come up all the time. I'm going to kind of gloss through these, verifying things like, in the metadata that the title is correct for the document and so on. So we'll mark this as passed. The reading order, right? Asking me to verify that the reading order is good. It is, because we checked that as we went through the tag tree before. Color checkpoint, we're passing here. And the language of the document is set to English, so I'm good to go on this one as well. Really want to focus on the link relevant checkpoints in today's time together. So in PDF UA, one of the things that we're asked to verify is, are the annotations in the correct reading order, right? So I'll go to edit checkpoint status here, and that's the question in the description. Please verify that the annotation is in the correct reading order, right? Which it is, so I can mark that as passed. Now it comes up for every annotation, right? But actually, seeing as I know that they're all correct because I've already checked the reading order, I can select all of these at once and pass all of them. That makes things go a little bit faster. Now, this next one, if the annotation used for visual formatting, please verify that it's tagged according to its semantic function. They're not used for visual formatting in this case, but they are tagged correctly. So I'll go ahead and bulk select these and pass them as well. But these are things that you might be asked about when you're running Common Look. And then asking me to verify the alternative text for all of my link tags, right? Please verify the alternative text is appropriate for the highlighted element. And when I selected it, it took me to the first link tag in the tag tree. Now, I went through all of the links one by one, assigning the alternative text, editing it as I needed, and so on. So I know that they're all good. So again, I'm just going to bulk select all of those and mark them as passed, right? Now, similarly, so now we're in WCAG 2.1, right? So as I mentioned, things are going to come up. Both standards are going to fully test the document. So now I'm being asked to verify the alternative text again for the link tags because it's a WCAG 2.1 thing. So again, I can bulk select. I know that the alt text is still good, so I can pass those as well. The color checkpoint, contrast, these come up again. We've already talked our way through those with PDF UA. And again, with metadata, WCAG wants you to check that too. So we're good to go there. Now, we're down to our warnings, right? So the first one, we have some untagged content in the document, like the lines underneath the links. So there's been artifact containers created to hold those. So yep, that's fine, okay? I know that I can pass that, by the way, because as I made my way through the tag tree, checking to make sure that the content was tagged correctly and all of that stuff that we do, anything that was untagged, I would have stopped and tagged it at that point. So I know that my artifact containers are now okay. This next one is about header, footer, pagination artifacts. We're good to go on this one as well. Don't have to worry about that. And then the link annotations, not defining the contents attribute, right? So I have a whole bunch of warnings for these. And again, if I use my fix wizard, I just double clicked to bring open the fix wizard, and Common Look is again filling this in for me, the contents. Now what it's doing though, is it's using the alternative text from the link tag as the contents for the annotation, right? And the way that I refer to this and why I actually address the failures for the link tags first, the link tag, if we look at the tag tree, the link tag comes before the annotation. So if I assign alternative text to the link tag, it's going to flow downhill and get applied to the annotation as well. Whereas if I if I fixed all of those annotation failures first, it wouldn't flow uphill, if you will, to be applied to the link tag. So that's why I take the particular approach that I showed you today. So there's my contents. I like it. I'm going to go with it. And then it comes up like, hey, verify that the reading order is good and all of that stuff as well. I'll take you to the next one. Well, the third link down. So when I change the hyperlinked text is the URL, I changed the alternative text to Common Look training calendar, and so that's what's being used for the contents on the annotation. Now, the nice thing about Common Look is, so I've taken care of all of my alternative text for the link tags. It's going to be applied to the contents. Once I've done that, fixed it, verified it, all that stuff already, I can just apply fix to all similar issues. I can actually take care of all of my annotations at once. So there they all are. And then, of course, they come back with user verify to verify that the alternative text is correct, or in this case, this is the reading order, but the reading order is still good, right? It hasn't changed anything just by assigning alternative text and contents. So the annotations are still not being used for formatting. So we're good to go there as well. One approach, by the way, that you might take, because you might be thinking to yourself, well, gee, why do I have to do everything twice, right? Maybe take care of the failures, take care of the warnings, and then take care of your user verification items so that it doesn't feel like you're doing double the work. But this is just the approach that I decided to take today. And then the artifact container being created and so on, which I just talked about a second ago, and we're good to go with these as well. So just making sure that I'm addressing all of the issues, or I don't have any headers or footers in my document, so we're good. This, however, provides a great segue into next week's webinar, where we are going to talk about tagging or not tagging headers and footers. So, cliffhanger, stay tuned for that. But we're good to go in this document. So we've taken care of all of our issues, and our PDF is tagged, accessible, PDF UA and WCAG 2.1 compliant, and there you go. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and open up for questions, and we'll check the Q&A pod. But before I do, just a quick reminder that we will email you a link to the captioned recording of our time together today. So be on the lookout for that. Also, I kind of threw a hint at next week's webinar on headers and footers. Please check out our calendar. The URL for that, https://commonlook.com/spring-2020-webinar-series. And if you have questions that come up after the fact, you want to follow up on anything, we don't get to your questions today, please feel free to reach out to us at sales@commonlook.com. And with that, I'll go ahead and check Q&A pod and see what we've got. So the first question, please define zippering again. Right, so first of all, that's not a technical term, so that we're all on the same page with that. Basically what I mean by that, when you have a link that's on 2 lines, inside your link tag, you want to have all of your text together and then all of your annotations together, or vice versa, all of your annotations together and then all of your text together, but don't split text annotation, right? Kind of zippering together, or sometimes I'll refer to it as weaving them together, right? But that's what that is. That's not a technical term. Don't take that out into the world and say that you learned it here, because that's just kind of like how we sometimes refer to it. But hopefully that helped. Right? The point is, keep your text and your annotations together, and obviously in the correct reading order within the link tag. Next thing, when a link is split in 2 lines, does a screen reader read the link twice? If so, is there anything you should do to avoid it, or just accept that it is an AT behavior? Good question. So it shouldn't, theoretically. Right now, I have heard some links sometimes get announced twice, and that at that point is the AT's behavior, the assistive technology's behavior. So our job from a remediation standpoint is making sure that the link is tagged correctly. And again, keeping the text together and so on so that it's not split might help with that. The alternative text, when there's alternative text applied to a link tag, that should also help with that. But if there's a breakdown at that point, then talk to your AT people about having their products read links correctly. I've encountered a few tagged documents where text items have been identified, tagged incorrectly as links, usually URL hyperlinks, but the PDF tool and Adobe will not let me change to something more appropriate, such as P or formula equation. Any suggestion on ways to succeed in convincing CommonLook that something it calls a link is not a link? Actually, yeah, I've seen this happen a lot, and when tags are added to documents, oftentimes Acrobat is guilty of this, but when tags get added, it quote unquote sees something in the document and says, hey, that looks like it should have an annotation attached to it, right? And so it puts an annotation in the page. This is not a CommonLook thing, because basically CommonLook PDF lives by two rules. We can't add or remove content, and we can't change the physical view. So CommonLook does not add links. When I was tagging things, the functionality of the links was already there. I was just creating the link tags. So if you need to delete things that, that a checker like CommonLook is telling you there's an annotation where there shouldn't be, go back into the PDF and delete the annotation, for example, in Acrobat, and then come back into CommonLook and finish tagging it. Hopefully that helped. Do you have to type text of / or /? No, you don't have to. Again, that comes down to how the rules for how AT reads stuff, and that's AT development decision, right? How do we read slashes, right? Do we say / or line or whatever? And that's up to the AT. For example, we don't define when and how to read periods, right, at the end of a sentence versus a decimal point in a number, for example. So that's all on the assistive technology for how to read that. We don't have to type out / / and stuff like that, or the www like www.com. No, you don't have to spell all that out. I'm remediating some documents that have a lot of path tags in the CommonLook PDF tag tree, many of them associated with links. Do I need to artifact these path tags? And if so, is there a way to select them all at once? Great question. So first of all, I know that it looks kind of misleading, and this is thanks to us being plugged into Acrobat where it's equally misleading, but a path is not a tag, right? Even though the icon makes it look like a tag. A path is a graphical element. And if you're talking about the paths that are in your links, it's probably the underline underneath the link, right? If you select the path, it's probably going to highlight in the physical view the underline for the link. So do you need to tag those? No, you don't. You can artifact those paths because the line doesn't convey any important information. The fact that you're putting your link in a link tag conveys that important information. So yes, you can artifact them. And is there a way to select them all at once? Yes, there's multiple ways to do that as well. Please feel free to follow up with us, sales@commonlook.com, and we can point you the right direction, for example, in our knowledge base and so on. For the annotation, do we also need to add content for the has content field and then adding a title to the parent link tag? So in CommonLook, when I provided the contents, that checkbox that sets the little flag there that indicates it does have contents gets automatically checked. So I don't have to manually do that. So that's taken care of for me, and thanks to the Fix Wizard. And then adding a title to the parent link tag. No, you do not need to add titles to any tags, actually. Assistive technology doesn't do anything with titles on tags. If you choose to add titles to tags, that's simply there for you as the remediator. When would a link be used for visual formatting? Long technical story that we probably don't have time for today, but there's a lot of different types of annotations that can be included in a PDF. So a link annotation won't be, form annotation won't be, but some of the other annotations that are available in PDF can be used for visual formatting. So that's why that checkpoint is there. Can you go over the multi-line link again? Maybe clarify which part you'd like a little more information on, but basically you have a link tag with an annotation for each line and the text from both lines together inside the link tag. And again, keep the annotations together and the text together. I'll go back to the PDF real quick just to show our 2-line link. Close my results panel. Sorry, I have to move the Q&A pod. So in the physical view, there's the 2-line link. Here's the link tag that contains the text and then both annotations, first from the top line and then second annotation is from the second line. So hopefully that helps, or feel free to reach out to us at sales@commonlook.com and we can follow up with you more fully then. Is the screen reader going to read both the link text and the link alt text, or just the link alt text? And a conforming screen reader that reads according to the standards is going to read just the alternative text. And if I don't have link alt text, it's going to read the link text by default correct. Yes, it should, in theory, assuming that your AT is working the way that it's supposed to. Have you already done a webinar on TOC? Yes, we have. And if you missed it, or if you didn't get the recording of it, check your junk email folder if you had signed up for it. Or again, please reach out to us at sales@commonlook.com. A split link gives 2 object reference, OBJR, right? Yes, it does. That shows up in CommonLook as the 2 annotations. In Acrobat, for example, it would look like 2 OBJRs. All right, continuing on, we see 2 OBJRs in InDesign when it's split. Cool. I'm not an InDesign guy, so I can't really speak to how InDesign does it, right? How should we address repetitive duplicate link warnings if we want to reference the same link twice? Well, you're going to get that warning if you've got the same link used multiple times. You're going to get that warning because that's a WCAG warning, right? On web pages, there has to be a way to, it's the bypass blocks, right? Checkpoint. So you've got to be able to get past all of the navigational links at the top of a web page, for example, and get to the content of the web page. Similarly, in PDF, if you have links that all have the same target, because it's a WCAG checkpoint thing to address, you're going to get that message that says, hey, you've got links that are all going to the same place. Is there, are these navigational links, and if they are, is there a way to skip them? Well, if you know that that's not an issue, then really you could just bulk select all of them, like I showed bulk selecting some of the other instances and then marking them as passed if needed. And looks like the second to the last question now. Should the alt text for a link that opens a web page be the title of the web page? As we all know, each web page has a title, or you can just make an arbitrary alt text as you see fit. Interesting question. I'm going to answer it generally speaking this way. You want your alternative text to be accurate, right? So if accurate alternative text is the title of the web page, then great. I would not just make it arbitrary alternative text because you want it to be alternative text that's accurate for what that link is going to do or where it's going to take somebody. So don't just make up garbage, right? Can you speak to footnote, endnote links in a document and where they should go inside the tag tree? Also, how does Assistive Tech read these? I was told to delete the links because it wasn't read properly with Screen Reader. I don't think that's correct, but I would like to know the correct way to tag and have the links read with AT. So long story short, links get tagged the way we talked about today, all right? Whether they're in a footnote, endnote, or whatever, okay? There's also use of note tag and stuff like that that does come into play. I think we're actually planning on doing another webinar on footnotes and endnotes and tagging them and stuff like that. Where the footnote is being referred to in the body of the document, you'll need to put that inside a reference tag. And then, of course, there's an annotation. So the annotation needs to go inside a link tag, and things can get a little bit dicey. And along those lines, they get dicey with how a screen reader reads them, because a screen reader says link for a reference tag and for a link tag. So then somebody will hear link, and then whatever's inside the link tag. But really, that's an implementation problem from an assistive technology standpoint. How do you do email? So I'm going to assume that you're talking about how do you format a link for email. Let's see if I hover over there we go. So I'm hovering over the sales@commonlook.com link in my PowerPoint, actually. It's formatted mail to, kind of all one word, mail to : and then the email address. So that's how you format the annotation for an email, right? So hopefully that helped. If that wasn't really your question, maybe drop another one in the Q&A pod or follow up with us at sales@commonlook.com. That being said, looks like that is all the questions in the Q&A pod. Thanks for joining in today. If you're frantically typing a question and you're afraid you're going to run out of time, you can always send it over to us at sales@commonlook.com, and we will follow up with you. Thank you very much for joining in. Have a great day, and hope to see some of you on another webinar soon. Take care.